I've noticed that on numerous occasions, Mike says that Scripture tells us that the Nephilim were done away with in the Old Testament. Why then are there still instructions that are suggestive of the angels still having potential to be enticed? For instance, if the reference to angels and the head covering harken back to Genesis 6, why is that significant unless cohabitation is still possible? Also, why does it matter if a woman's hair is covered in the New Covenant?
Well, I would say first, the wording of the question sort of presumes that the Watchers or the sons of God and the Nephilim are kind of the same, but they're not. And I think, that the questioner understands that, but the wording, the way the question's worded makes me just wonder a little bit, so I just start there. 1 Corinthians 11 obviously doesn't mention Nephilim, but the gist of the question is, why was Paul concerned? Well, the fact that Paul would be concerned about angelic enticement is no justification for arguing that there are Nephilim now. It just means he was concerned. In other words, it means exactly what you would think it would mean, that in Paul's mind, that this possibility was there. Okay, a possibility is not an actuality. Again, these are just simple ways of just thinking coherently about the topic we're discussing. The instructions Paul give, really, I don't even like the word instructions. They're not instructions that Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 11 about the head covering in the sense that Paul's saying, do X, because if you don't do X, then Y will happen. Okay, that isn't the sense of what Paul's doing. Rather, Paul's advice shows he's concerned. He considers a Genesis 6-like event to, perhaps be possible. That doesn't mean it was happening. It doesn't mean it would happen again. Okay, Paul's just reflecting a fear or concern, something, again, that's kind of lurking in the back of his mind. But there's no guarantee that if someone who, some woman who listened to Paul and read that and said, well, forget that, I'm leaving my head covered, I'm doing what I want, to flaunt my sexuality, that doesn't mean that something's going to happen to her. In other words, the cause and effect mechanism here is not being taught in 1 Corinthians 11. 1 Corinthians 11 is not teaching a cause-effect reality, and in some cases even a potentiality. What it does, what Paul's wording suggests, is that in his mind, he thought that there was, there's a reason to be concerned. There's some possibility here, but we can't sort of convert that possibility in Paul's head to something that would indeed happen. Possibilities are just that. They are possibilities. They are not actualities. A potentiality is not an actuality. Again, we could just go over these terms like this to try to draw the distinction, but I think that would get a little annoying. So I would just say Paul isn't predicting anything. His words reflect a concern of his. There's no evidence from the fact that he was concerned that anything was happening. The Old Testament does make it quite clear that the giant clan lines were destroyed. That's the whole point of what happens with the Rephaim. The remnant there, flees to the cities of the Philistines. That's where we find them next. Goliath and his brothers are taken out. They're exterminated. We never get another reference to them. Even if you're reading the Septuagint, you have a reference to Anakim in Jeremiah, but it's a reference back to the Philistines. There's just no evidence for this. Zero in Scripture that we have a Nephilim presence, beyond the Old Testament period, on into the intertestamental period, on into the New Testament. All we can say is that from the way Paul wrote this, he thought that it could happen again. In other words, there's nothing in his mind that says it can't happen again, but we can't convert that to saying, oh, it was, or it is. Or if somebody just, flaunted, their sexuality, some woman in Corinth, that it was going to happen, that was the trigger event. It's going to produce this effect. This is the cause that produces this effect. All of those things are overstatements. They overstate the data. So I don't think we should read into what Paul said. We should just sort of leave it where Paul left it.